Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have one of our favorite guests with us. We have Dr. Angela Celeste May. We know her as our clinical, our organizational, and our forensically trained psychologist, but she is also the president and co-founder of A.M. Associates Incorporated. She is the president and founder of Celeste Productions Incorporated. She's an author, editor, musician, and she is the 2023 President's Distinction Award from the Michigan Psychological Association Foundation. She is the first Black chair-elect of the Michigan Health Council Trustee Board in its 82-year history, so she's a trailblazer. And she was formerly a columnist for the Michigan Women's Forum, a group of women called Phenomenal Michigan Women, which created a column titled Stars, Scholars Teaming to Alleviate Racism in Society. And this evening, Dr. Angie is here with us talking about America's obsession with Black bodies. Good evening, Dr. Angie, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Kim. It's great to be here.
Thank you. All right, so let's get to it. I've been so excited to talk about this topic, not because but because of the topic. The nature of the topic is very sensitive, and I just want to make that known. There was a young woman in Atlanta. Her name is Adriana Smith. She was pregnant, I believe, past 6 weeks, went to the hospital, was complaining of head pains, and the doctors dismissed her. She came back, said, I'm still having these pains. They dismissed her. She ended up coming back again and dying. But because she was pregnant, they had to resuscitate her, but discovered she was brain dead because she had a blood clot in her brain. And so, because this is Georgia, and Georgia has the heartbeat law, which essentially says if we detect a heartbeat, we have to do everything we can to protect that child, not the mother, the child. This woman was put on life-saving machines and she was kept alive for several months. She just recently delivered this baby via C-section. Baby was like a pound and a few ounces. This baby is currently in the NICU. And from what I read, they said one of the reasons that the baby had to be born at the mark that it was is because her body was beginning to break down. It was beginning to decay because essentially she was dead. Her brain was dead. Her body was simply being kept alive by machines. What's interesting about this, Dr. Angie, we can go back through history and talk about Henrietta Lacks, how her cells were used for cancer research and so many other different types of treatments without her knowledge. We can talk about the father of gynecology, we will, J. Marion Sims, who experimented on enslaved Black women and built the foundation of what gynecology is today on the back of Black women. Dr. Angie, what is the obsession that America has with Black bodies? What is that about?
Excuse me. I would say that your use of the term obsession is not, it's not an exaggeration, but I would add in there the word entitlement.
Yes.
The feeling of, as we always preface by saying, it's not every white person, of course, but the multiple hundreds of years long trend and historical record, some of just a few of which you have already mentioned, has shown that there is this feeling of entitlement that a lot of the white population, and if we just stick with our country, United States of America, it's not just here, but in the United States of America, that has been passed down. So, and has contributed to an obsession, if you will, with our with Black bodies. The history of supposed ownership, we're going to put that in quotations, because can you really own another human being who are all made by the same creator? So in quotations, this multiple hundreds of years long history, very much having to do with the transatlantic slave trade, has contributed to the idea that white people are entitled to Black bodies as though they are their possessions. And as with any kind of cultural shift that one is trying to make, it's I liken try to change I'm not the only one who does that, but I liken, as many psychologists do, to trying to change a culture, to try to change someone's personality. A personality, like a culture, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's very entrenched, and it's something that's developed over days and weeks and years that a person or an environment or a community is poured into with certain sets of ideas, certain laws, certain behaviors that come together to create a certain way of being toward one another. It contributes to one's identity in terms of how one sees oneself, how one sees one's group and other groups, and so all of that. So the history of this transatlantic slave trade cannot be separated from this psychological leaning towards believing on some level, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that white people are literally entitled to Black bodies. What does that mean? Entitled to, just like what you described, entitled to use, entitled to abuse, entitled to every aspect of Black life. So yes, true to your title for today, the Black bodies, for sure, but that also includes Black intellect, Black intellectual property, Black talent, all of that. So it's very, very much rooted in the systemic racism of our country and other countries as well. And history has shown the passing down of this sick and twisted concept that the only legitimate life is white life. And if you have Black lives and brown lives and other, people who are not considered, we know white is a concept and races are a concept as well, which is separate from ethnicity, which has to do with your actual genealogy, which is a whole other conversation. But that whole idea of whiteness and Blackness itself is very much rooted in the history of colonialism and racism and racist systems. So all of that is so deeply entrenched in our country's soil, as it is in other places that were touched by the transatlantic slave trade over hundreds of years. And so that's something that is not easily let go of. And I would say for both sides, that's not that easily let go of by those who feel that they are privileged and entitled to Black bodies and intellect and life. And also it can take something for those who are on the victimization receiving end of that nonsense. I say that nonsense because we are all full human beings. But when you've been inundated and indoctrinated with that kind of conversation and that kind of information and that kind of treatment, from everything from your skin color to your hair texture to the way you move, to the way you speak, to the way you use language, to the point where every part of you is picked apart and held up as less than white folks, then all of that ties together to contribute to an obsessive belief that if Black people in particular, but if Black people try to create life away from me, the white person, well, that I'm uncomfortable with that. We can't have that. Yes, we can't have that. No, because that interrupts my identity. Part of my identity is that I'm entitled to you. So I need you to cooperate with that idea that's been passed down and helps me to feel powerful.
Yes.
So all of those things are tied together.
So you bring up some really great points. I want to go back to the concept of whiteness because in America, when you talk about the transatlantic slave trade, when we talk about the notion that many people believed that they could own Africans because
Mhm.
Africans were less than human, Africans had no souls. And it's interesting because it's 2025 and
Mhm.
we're hearing some of that same language repeated. And I will say to people when I hear that, you don't have anything original to say they were saying that back in the 16, 1700s. That means it's true. I said, no, all of that information has been debunked. It's in a book. Maybe if you pick up a book and read a little bit, you could enlighten yourself. But, you know,
Mhm.
what I find interesting with that is that in the medical field, and I've had this issue, whether
Mhm.
I'm delivering a child. I've had 2
Mhm.
children and have had to ask for medication. Thankfully, I had an African doctor. I am so thankful for my doctor because she was wonderful because whatever I needed, I got.
Mhm.
But there are women who have talked about needing something, a pain or some type of medication, and doctors saying, well, they're only going to give you such and such, but this doesn't work. Well, that's all we're going to give you. What are you
Mhm.
looking for? As if they're shopping for Oxycontin or one of
Mhm.
these other different drugs. And, I remember being a child, don't do drugs. That was the big thing. And it's interesting to me that drugs decimated many Black communities across the United States of America. But
Mhm.
and I'm not, please don't feel as if I'm lessening this, but when kids started doing case spice and huffing and some of these designer drugs that are coming from overseas and some of the drugs that the doctors are giving them and they were getting hooked on them, people say, oh, we have an opioid crisis. And I thought we have a drug crisis in this country. Some people get their drugs from a doctor, other people get their drugs from different places. There is a problem in this country when people feel they need to take something to deal with life.
Mhm.
That means things are not balanced. And oftentimes, and this is a real situation, my husband was a former athlete and now he has bad knees, like many older men
Mhm.
who played football and basketball. And his knee was swollen, and we had gone to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, most most people feel pain differently." I said, "Oh, this isn't one of those Black people don't feel pain. My husband does have a high threshold, but he's in pain. You're going to help him, and if you cannot, we're going to find someone who can." And she just looked at me. I was like, "Oh, we're not playing that game."
Mhm.
But you still have people who believe Black people don't feel pain or Black people's pain is different than other people.
Mhm. Well,
Uh,
and if I may interject,
Please.
it's not just that they just believe it. Some of that, I was just reading some of these studies recently myself as well. Some of
Mhm.
these, this is being taught
Yes,
still in medical school. Like
yes.
it's still being taught.
Our skin is
Absolutely.
thicker. Our skin is thicker than
Absolutely.
everybody else's. It's not.
Mhm.
It is the same. And I did
Mhm.
not go to medical school, but I know that from reading journals. There is no difference between our skin. Just as you started at the top of the show, where you said we were all created by the same creator. I often
Mhm.
use this example, and people sometimes get mad. Labradors come in several different colors. You can have a blonde Labrador, you can have a chocolate brown Labrador, they're beautiful.
Mhm.
You can have an ebony black Labrador, and then you can just have a regular, I forget what the other color is. It's blonde, chocolate brown, black, and there's one other color, maybe just like a regular brown or something. But
Mhm.
they're all Labradors. There's no
That's
difference.
right.
They're all
That's right. I love that example.
They just
Exactly.
have different colors. And the
Mhm.
same thing with people. And I often tell people all the time, I said, God, when you look at the world, he made birds in all different kinds of colors and different types of feathers, but they're all birds. I said,
Mhm.
you can look at a lion and tell what a lion is. You can look at a tiger and tell what a tiger is. You can look at a cougar and tell what a cougar is. But they are all part of the cat family. Human
Mhm.
beings are the same. Some of us have a little bit more color than others. Just nothing. We're all human. However,
Mhm.
many of us get treated differently because of the shading of our skin.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, especially in medical situations, things will be said. Oh, your skin is thicker, or you must have a high pain tolerance. And I remember when I was pregnant, I told my doctor, I do not have a high pain tolerance. I cry at a paper cut. Please give me drugs. Do not
Mhm.
let me suffer because it's not going to be pretty. But for many people, they struggle with this. My
Mhm.
grandmother was the uh uh she was on the receiving end. She actually is my great aunt, but we called her my grandmother because my biological mom's mother had died when she was very young. So my great aunt took over and she was like our grandmother. And she ended up having a Mississippi appendectomy, which is when you are in the South and you go to the gynecologist and they take all of your parts out, your uterus and everything. And so she ended up with a hysterectomy, had no idea that she had a hysterectomy, but she did. And so she could never have a baby. Um, and they still really weren't sure because my grandmother ended up having a uterine type of cancer. So she had some of her parts, but not everything. And so whatever whatever they did, Fannie Lou Hamer famously coined that phrase, the Mississippi appendectomy. And
Yes. Mhm.
Dr. Angie, for many people, this obsession with Black bodies, the entitlement of to Black bodies makes many women, especially Black women, leery of going to the doctor. And so
Absolutely.
many times our cancers are much more aggressive. They
Mhm.
are found at later stages because people just don't trust doctors.
Mhm.
One, you have a system of belief. As you said, many of them are still teaching some of this false notion. So
Mhm.
as you go into a doctor, if you don't have, somebody to advocate for you or you're advocating for yourself, you're listening to a doctor talk down to you or tell you
Yeah.
this is what you have. And you might feel in your heart, this doesn't feel right, but they're a doctor. So I have to trust what they believe. What would you say to people who struggle with that, especially with the fear and what we're seeing happening, women not necessarily having autonomy over themselves, especially when many of them can easily become pregnant. And although we know all pregnancies are different and anything
Mhm.
can change at any given time,
Mhm.
that's not to say that a pregnancy is a bad thing, but it's one of those situations that can be life threatening for women.
Yeah, it definitely can be for certain women, like you said, in some situations. Well, I think one of the main things is something you already said, which is to um, try to have someone who can advocate for you. Um, there's the few different things. Even let's just back up for a second. One of the things that I would say, if you're able to prior to getting pregnant, um, whether you're planning to or not, because a lot of times people aren't, planning to be pregnant, but just as a good advice, steps to take just in life. Um, it's important for all of us, really, actually, before we get sick, before we get pregnant, whatever, is to try to work on having a good, sound, trustworthy support system. It doesn't have to be tons and tons of people, but a few key people in your life that you feel you can trust, that you feel can speak on your behalf, that you feel have your best interest at heart. That's really, really important, just in life anyway. So that when something happens, these are people that you could call on. I think that's really important. And then it's also important, just as people say, it's important to have those difficult conversations about wills and what might happen if something happens to me and all of that. It's also important to have these conversations again before you get pregnant, before you get sick. It's just a good thing for all of us to do is to have some conversations with people in the support network around you, um, as to having talks about what could happen, what you would want, that kind of thing. So try to have that in place if you can. Having some of those conversations is important prior to. And then in terms of people who find themselves in those situations, same kind of thing. If you can call on someone that you trust, that you believe could will stand up for you. That's important. Secondly, we always encourage people to advocate for themselves as well. And that's something else you also mentioned. What is involved in advocating for yourself? Trying to educate yourself as much as possible. The internet helps make things a lot more accessible more quickly. So looking up conditions. Does that replace the expertise of a doctor? No, we're not saying that at all. But it does help to, if you will, elevate your conversations, and it helps to inform you as to certain kinds of questions that you might want to ask about your condition, etc. So arming yourself with as much information as you can, recognizing that you have a right to ask questions. There are ethics rules that our medical professions are supposed to adhere to, that their license says that they must adhere to. Trying to find out what kinds of questions to ask, doing as much research and reading, even if it's just Googling some stuff as you can, recognizing that you have a right to ask. And if you're not getting the answers that you want, get another opinion. Go someplace else until you feel you're getting some of the answers that you are looking for. This example it's not having to do with the Black community per se, but an example of that would be the famous Fran Drescher, who played the nanny, right?
Yeah.
She created her Cancer Schmancer Foundation, and the book that she wrote after her own, I believe it was uterine cancer. I think it was a unique type of cancer that she had. I bring her up because she was misdiagnosed so many times, and she had to go back and get other opinions and until she got answers that she was looking for. And she too had been dismissed. So unfortunately, this happens with Black women, definitely women of color. There's no doubt. But it happens with women in general also. So don't feel that you have to maintain this. This is something that we don't talk about enough. Why don't people consider getting a second or a third opinion? Sometimes they feel like almost guilty, like there's a loyalty to that doctor, or I don't want to. They may not say this in words or even think these actual words, but the feeling can be that I'm being disloyal, that I'm being unfair to my doctor by, going. It can feel like going behind their back. And so I would say that the best doctors in terms of integrity and sticking to their ethical code would be those doctors that encourage you to get a second and third opinion so that you are satisfied, that you feel you're getting the answers that you want. So that's really important. That I always want to say to people that you not only have a right, but you have an obligation to yourself to get seek and continue to seek and get some of those answers. That young lady that you mentioned in the example that you were talking about, who did end up passing away, who was pregnant and whom they, kept her alive, or kept her body going, I should say. Unfortunately, that's not as uncommon a situation as we would like it to be. And from what I understand of the story, correct me if I'm wrong, when she went back, it makes sense. Of course, she would go back again and again to those, to tell them you're not, and it may not have occurred to her to go elsewhere. So you can go back again to the same people, but if you feel you're not getting those answers, if you have other hospitals in your community, there are some rural places that, there aren't many places that they can go. But if there are some other places that you can get to get some answers after you've tried that place once or twice, you have a right and an obligation to try to do that. So those are some things I would say to keep in mind. Also, trust your gut. Trust listen to what your body is telling you, as ethical people in the medical profession say, and as I would mirror that as well. If you feel something is not right, then listen to that, and continue to try to work to get answers for that as much as you're able to. And again, that support network, talk through it with someone that you trust in your life, and try to get those people around you, even if it's just one or two. Sometimes it just takes that one person in your corner who will really push for you. So those things are all important for all of us to try to minimize this kind of thing happening.
Mhm. Absolutely. Those that is some great advice. Last thing that I want to bring up, it was interesting because I'm looking at this, and I know you said that this isn't that unusual.
Mhm,
Adriana, Adriana Smith being essentially an incubator for a baby and
mhm,
being kept alive. There's a Republican legislator woman. She was in Florida and she got pregnant, realized that she was pregnant, but found out somehow that it was an ectopic pregnancy. Now,
mhm,
ectopic pregnancy means that that baby or that egg is growing inside of your tubes, your
mhm,
fallopian tubes. That is not a viable pregnancy. A baby cannot live in the tubes. It's not large enough. None of the nutrients and all that can breach the fallopian tube. So it's not. And she said to her doctor, "Well, I need you to terminate this pregnancy." And they said, "Oh, no, we're not doing that." And she said, "But you have to." They said, you are part of the group that passed the legislation for this heartbeat law. There's a heartbeat, although it's very, I don't know what the um, correct language and terminology is, but they could determine that there was life. And no one wanted to help her because they said, I might lose my license over this and I could go to jail. I'm in violation of the law. Dr. Angie, can you talk about the difference in how this woman would have been treated or may have been treated? And eventually she was able to get it. They called in favors, they weren't able to get it. But later, I guess her health started to deteriorate and they had to do something. So
mhm,
eventually they acted for her. But I think back to what you said. If Adriana had just gone someplace else, or if someone had just listened to her, maybe they could have found that blood clot in time and
mhm,
helped her because this woman, not only did she leave this infant behind that grew in her dead body, she left a 7-year-old boy,
mhm,
her only child. And now he lives with his grandmother. And his grandmother kept saying, "Let her go. We don't even know what this baby is going to look like, but we have a child here that we're trying to take care of. And, we want to do the right thing for him." Can you talk a little bit about the differences in how those situations were handled and how some people might struggle in feeling certain ways about that?
Well, one thing I would say about in answer to your question is to acknowledge and validate for people who are struggling with that their struggle is real
Mhm.
and it should be respected,
Mhm.
that the pain that they're going through is real and it should be respected and it should be listened to. Because
Mhm.
there are a lot of elements and layers to the pain of that. The not being listened to, not being respected, um, really feeling like that your body is not your own. I mean, guilt. I mean, there's so much that can be attached physiologically and definitely psychologically and mentally, emotionally, um, to all of these kinds of situations. So uh, at the very minimum, in respecting people, respecting women of color, it's important to validate and acknowledge for them and with them that the struggles that they're feeling are real
Yes.
and it's not all in their head and that they're not exaggerating, that these things are very important and painful and again very 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 real. The differences between those two is can be found, those two situations can be found in something you were saying as you were sharing the two stories, and that is for the legislator, she was able to call in favors,
Yes.
and that meant that she had some power, some privilege, some power, something upon which she could call on. But even she unfortunately had to go through some deterioration of her health even to get to that point. So this reminds me of our last conversation when we were talking about that whole idea of having a voice. That feeling that you don't have a voice when you're not being heard, when you're being dismissed, literally and figuratively dismissed, sent home, not being heard, that just compounds all that a person is going through, all that these women are dealing with. So in some ways, those two situations are similar in that they are women not being heard or respected by the medical community or medical profession. In the case of the legislator, they did hear her, but they were, like you said, there's the irony, right? That they were following a law that she helped to get across the finish line. And so because of that, they heard her, but they were not inclined to do anything to help her. And what both of those have in common is that in terms of the medical profession and professions under medicine, all of this flies in the face of their Hippocratic oath that they are all required to take, in which the first tenet of the Hippocratic oath for any physician is to do no harm. And to ignore, to dismiss, to refuse treatment, to all of those kinds of things, it flies in the face of that. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a long way to go. People, especially in our particular American society, United States. I won't say America because there are other aspects of North America that for which they do give help if you don't have insurance and all of that. But particularly in our United States of America, where our insurance situation is not the best. President Barack Obama did a lot to try to give millions, he didn't try to successfully give millions of people healthcare coverage, and that includes so many women who are in these situations. But as he acknowledged at the time, it wasn't a perfect solution. There was more to do then. Now, as these things are being stripped away and more, they're trying to be stripped away from the White House and those around the White House, we're going backwards in a lot of ways. So it's important for all of us to acknowledge talking about respecting bodies and the minds that come with them, all of us to acknowledge the value of all life. So that means the life of the baby or the child inside the body, but also the life of the person carrying that life. And so every situation is unique. Every situation is different. There may be some situations where you cannot save the mother, but you can save the child. There are other situations in which, like you said, it's an ectopic pregnancy. And, but people in the professions need the freedom to exercise. I will say this as well. They need the freedom to exercise their medical expertise to care for and give the treatment needed in that particular situation.
Yes.
That's across the board, no matter who it is. But we are seeing that being hampered for women and for people, it's for women, it's for people in poverty, it's for, it's just, we have a lot of work to do. And we have a lot of work to do to try to save what healthcare we have left in this country. That should not be something that's just for the elites, but definitely just circling back to the theme of our conversation today. There is a twisted there's a twisted, I would say, and sick concept, psychological concept that there are people who have a better idea of how to best care for people that they deem to be less than in some way. We don't mean people who may be a harm to themselves or others who perhaps are not as coherent or are not fully in touch with reality, and maybe they're having some other kind of psychological or mental breakdown. But even in some of those cases, as much as possible, the best standard of care for everyone including Black bodies, Black people, and the minds that that are housed in those Black bodies, is to always try to include that person in their care. That's the best situation. And that, again, that is even for someone who may be dealing with some things mentally, but you still do as much as you can out of respect for their humanity and out of valuing life. So how do we get from point A to point B in terms of to stop devaluing Black bodies and Black lives and women, et cetera? One of the places is just to start is to acknowledge and practice acknowledging that they have value and that they have equal value as anyone else across the board. That's why it's so important to try to take away, not gonna work, to try to take away the teaching of the true history of all of the contributions of the brilliance of Black people, of Black women, of women, and all of that, to try to take away rights, to try to take away DEI and diversity programs, all of that, because it threatens all of those things. They threaten power, which is power for the few, but they all, and together with that power, one of the most important ways to wrongly maintain power is to continue to perpetuate these lies about how Black bodies and Black minds within those bodies and brilliance are less valuable. And so in order to maintain those lies, we have to try to cover up and take away the truths that are staring us in the face. So, and that it is all tied together. It's very old. And the obsession, and I have to say this too, we can't leave this conversation when we're talking about the obsessions with Black bodies without talking about not only trying to control Black bodies, but trying to mimic them in every way possible.
Absolutely.
Right.
Lips,
mimic the way,
buttocks,
all of that, from the bun to the lips, to the skin tone, to the hair texture, all of it, mimicking the way that Black folks move, the way Black folks talk, all of that. It's old as the hills, nothing new, but it's all part and parcel of a need to try to tamp down the other because of being threatened. As we've talked about before, when you are comfortable enough in your own skin and you really believe you are valuable, you don't feel the need to tamp anyone else down. That in and of itself is indicative of feeling, that you are less than. So we have to tackle it, as with everything, psychologically, with the stories that are told to ourselves and our kids, with our history, with acknowledging our value, with calling a thing and saying it out loud. All of that. We've got to tackle it from all those different directions, with protests and voting and all of that. All of that. I love the saying that my husband says that he got from the elders in his family: that steady knock puts a hole through the rock.
Ooh, just I like that.
I love that. I love it. Steady knock. Just keep going. Just keep knocking that down. We may not see, like Martin Luther King said, he may not get there with you, may not see everything, but it makes a difference. Just keep pushing. Keep pushing that. And as a result, we do have some of our younger generation coming up learning more about the value of Black folks, Blackness, Black women, all of that, than we learned even growing up, finding out more about it. So it's a steady knock, puts a hole through the rock to continue to elevate our worth to what it should be.
Dr. Angie, that's a great way to end our show. But before we get out of here, thank you again. But before we get out of here, tell us how we can reach you, and then tell us how we can find you on social media and what you have coming up next.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I don't have my book here in front of me, but if your listeners and watchers go into barnesandnoble.com or exlibris.com, or just Google Dr. Angela Celeste May and the title Freedom. The full title is Freedom: What is the Experience of Living Without Negative Self-Imposed Limitations? Then you will find my book, which many people, just about really everyone who's read it, has said has been very helpful for them to find out how people from many different backgrounds were able to get from a place of stuckness in their lives, regardless of whether it's career or self-esteem issues or relationships, to a place of freedom. And there are 7 themes that came out of the research that I did for that book. So many people have found it very helpful. So I do encourage everyone to check that out. What do I have coming up? I continue to be a professor of psychology at Wayne County Community College District, which I've been since 2011, and I am teaching a psychology course this fall. I continue to be a co-member. I am president with my sister Michelle Ann May, who's vice president of our company A.M. May and Associates Incorporated, where we do counseling, consulting, and coaching. You can find out about us and what we do at our website, AMAssociates.com. You can also go to our Facebook page and our Instagram as well and find out more about what we do. For myself, I do consulting with both nonprofit and for-profit companies. I do executive coaching, which is working predominantly one-on-one with executives and with CEOs of companies, just working through things that they need to move forward, improve, and become stronger and better leaders in what they do. We work from everything from communication skills or whatever may be needed. You can follow me as an individual also on Facebook at Angela Celeste May. I use my full name for everything. Instagram, on YouTube, LinkedIn also. And musically, my Celeste Productions company, I teach piano and voice here in the Metro Detroit area. So you can reach out to me at Dr. Angela Celeste May on Facebook. That's one way you can reach me if you are interested. I don't have anything on the horizon. I'm taking a little summer break. I'll have more performances coming up in the fall. I will have public speaking coming up in the fall. So I'm taking a break from my emceeing and all that wonderful stuff. But right now we are enjoying our Kim and myself, our birthday month. So we're enjoying our birthday month and relaxing a little bit and celebrating. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Wonderful, Dr. Angie. So we're going to let you enjoy the rest of July and
Thank
enjoy your birthday. So from all of us here at the Kim B. Davis Show, we want to wish you a wonderful and blessed happy birthday and
Thank
enjoy
you.
summer. And we will see you back in August.
Sounds good. And same to you. Happy birthday. Happy
Thank
July
you.
birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we know that next month when you come on, we'll have another exciting topic that you will break down for us and have another great conversation. So thank you for being with us again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Guys, you know me. I'm Kimberly Baxter Davis. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Red Note, Spill, Fanbase, Threads. You can see this show. I know it's so many. You can see this show on youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can hear this show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Wisdom, and Audible. And to learn more about me as an author, visit kimbdavis.com. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you will join us on our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.